Hey guys, how you doing today? Just getting off work, walking on home, right? Oh, busy. Everybody's busy all the time. We're always moving, we're always doing, we're always either recovering from or moving to our job. I think I'm going to title this one, who do the liberals work for anyway? Because it's not us. It's obviously not us, right? Like, really pause and stop and contemplate and think for just a small smidgen of a moment and really ask yourself, if a genie showed up and it said, I can change something of your life, I can make your life easier, what you're going to say, beyond the shadow of a doubt, is, boy, I'd like to work less. Maybe you'd say something more grand than that. Maybe you'd be like, I wish I had infinite money, or I wish I had all the time in the world, or something like this. But fundamentally what you're saying is, I wish I could work less. And I think anybody who told you that they wanted to work less is either working in some kind of dream environment where magic is real, or they literally own the place, so of course they're going to want to keep working at it. Or they're just lying, right? They don't want to be called lazy. They don't want to be hit with some kind of moniker. But everyone wants to work less. Everyone wants their life to be easier. And yet when it comes time to have these discussions in the political arena, we're not supposed to actually bring that to the forefront. We're not actually supposed to say, I would like my life to be easier, if you're in politics, right? There's this entire party called the Conservative Party that will actually berate you and insult you and call you all manner of things if you actually say, I would like my life to be easier. Because fundamentally what the conservatives want is they want you to do all the work while they do nothing. That's conservative ideology right there. We do everything, they do nothing. And if you stand up and protest that, then you're lazy, while they're trying to enforce their own laziness. It's pretty incredible, actually. But we know that about the conservatives. So the question becomes then of the liberals, why aren't the liberals making our lives easier? Right? You might be able to make the argument, well, the liberals did make marijuana legal, right? Certainly that must have made our lives easier. I don't really give them credit for this. I don't really stand up and say like, oh boy, good thing the liberals did that. Because it's such, like, oh, you made a plant legal. Like, ooh, you made something legal that should have never been made illegal in the first place. So it's like not even low-hanging fruit. It's like they literally like picked a fruit that had fallen on the ground. Like it's so low, it's so infinitesimally tiny that I refuse to give anybody who actually does it any kind of credit level, right? I'm going to actually walk to the park here and finish this up because there are people right outside my door and they're going to have a big long conversation and it's all going to get recorded while I'm trying to record this, so forget it. Also, it's a beautiful day. It's kind of windy out, so sorry if there's like a lot of like can't win sometimes, you know? You can't win. Sometimes you want to do a recording. People keep saying to me that what I'm doing is actually quite ambitious. It's like a half-hour recording every single day. And I don't know, now that I've kind of fit it into my life, I think it's okay. Because I just refuse. I refuse to let my life go by silently while we pretend like everything's okay, right? Like we're in this like so total nonsense space where everything is complete and utter garbage. Like, we should be able to enjoy our lives and slow down and have things happen at a much slower pace than this. Like, where are we going? What are we racing around for? What's the end goal here, right? And of course capitalists want us to go as fast as possible because it means more money for them while they do nothing, right? Like, capitalists don't do anything. They just sit on their ass and take in all the money. And we're supposed to just go along with that. And meanwhile, the liberals, and I've already said, right, that's what the conservatives are, and yet 30% of the populace seems to think that it's a good idea to vote conservative, even though they're like the most reprehensible sociopathic version of a capitalist, right? At least the liberals pretend like they're not, even though they completely are, which actually, in my view, makes them more dangerous and worse, because they pretend like they have a kind of moral superiority and then just act like conservatives. And the only difference, like, I do think that the liberals acted differently in the COVID crisis, right? They actually passed important legislation that they are insisting will be temporary. And so I say, well, then let's make their leadership temporary, right? Let's make their leadership as temporary as their assistance. And the reality is that the liberals, they work just as hard for the capitalist class as the conservatives do. And what have they actually done for us? Like, what have the liberals actually done for us that is tangible, that has improved our lives, that have made things easier? And for me, nothing. Absolutely nothing, right? I'm not in a position where I'm not able to go back to school. Like, that's not a real thing. Like, I'm not able to train up to go back to school. Their record on climate change is a disaster, right? Their foreign policy is a complete and utter farce, right? These guys don't even have the spine to stand up and say, like, maybe the democratically elected leader of Venezuela is the democratically elected leader. No, it's this Guaido guy. He's the guy that we're going to take seriously. Yeah, right. Because at the end of the day, right, like the liberals don't want to on the national stage, like on the international stage, I should say, they don't want to stand up and actually fight the United States, right? They because for us here in Canada, like, it's just a numbers game, right? The United States is such an enormous force that lives just on our border, right? And they're in the middle of this collapsing civil war that's probably going to take decades to resolve itself. And here in Canada, we're just sort of hoping it doesn't spill over and wipe us out. And so the Americans stand up and say, we're going to do this in Venezuela. And here in Canada, we kind of just shrug and go, like, okay, like, what can we do, right? Like, we can't afford turning the United States into an enemy, not a direct enemy, even though they're working overtime and working as hard as they can to ensure that everyone sees them as an enemy. But the liberals, right, they don't help us. They know what the right thing to do is, right? They know that they could pass a basic income tomorrow. They know that they could make it so that we had a 4-day week. They know that they could give us free dental. They know that they could give us universal eye coverage. They know that they could give us universal pharmacare. Like, they know that they can do these things. These things are not only attainable, the fact that they aren't being pushed forward is a sin. Like, it is a crime, in my view. Like, not only are they affordable, they are life-saving. They would help the society in a massive, massive way. They could eliminate homelessness. They could eliminate poverty. They could give control of people's lives back to the people who are voting for them. They actively choose not to do these things. They know that they could, but they actively choose not to. Because at the end of the day, they work for the capitalist class, and they are part of the capitalist class. And capitalism is a slave system, right? It requires people to work for as little pay as possible, or for free, i.e. slavery, so that the capitalists can sit around and do nothing, right? And if you point this out, well, then you must be lazy or jealous or envious. because they can't have a legitimate conversation about what's actually happening, right? All they can do is lie. That's how capitalists operate. That's the core of who they are, is that they are liars, and they're not interested in engaging in a legitimate conversation that's fact-based or evidence-based. They can't fight on that footing, right? They have to live in a propagandistic space. They have to lie as often as possible, because they understand that if you just repeat lies over and over and over again, those lies will just become the truth. And they're not actually capable of existing in a truth space, because if they existed in a truth space, then they would have to admit that they're slavers. And that's all capitalism has ever been. It has not enjoyed a single moment of its existence where it has not been a slave system. It's designed to be a slave system. It's supposed to be a slave system. It is what happens when a bunch of rich white guys get together and say, how can I do no work and make everybody else work for me? And the liberals are just part of that system, which is why I think supporting them is just a dunder move. Like, I mean, I think if you support the conservatives, you're evil, but like, if you support the liberals, I think you've just been duped. I think you're just a dupe who buys into the idea that, who buys into the propaganda and rhetoric that the liberals put forward, but refuse to actually acknowledge and pay any attention to the actions that they do, right? Like, they sell weapons to the Saudi Arabians. Like, what the fuck do you think that's about, right? Do you think that's because they think Saudi Arabia is like a nice place? No, it's because Saudi Arabia protects the interests of the capitalist society, right? Like, that's Saudi Arabia is quelling dissent and destroying other countries on behalf of the capitalist structure, right? Which is fueled off of slavery and war. And we are happily selling arms to the Saudi Arabians to achieve that goal. Or the liberals are, specifically. And of course the conservatives would. Like, they're not going to not do that, because they want money. Like, as simple as that. They want money. Like, I know that here in Canada we can do better, but the reality is that our opposition parties, which is the NDP and the Greens, like, the NDP should have overwhelming support at this point, right? It absolutely should. The Liberals are continuously showing themselves to be these incompetent, corrupt capitalists, and the Conservatives are showing themselves to just be blatantly evil, and yet people have just kind of eaten like the gullible sauce, right? They're just like gulping it up as fast as they possibly can, and they're not interested. And I was actually talking to a friend just the other day, and he pointed out that, like, one of the great myths, like, right now we are in the amount of income equality that exists now is actually worse than it was right before the French Revolution. That the French pulled out the guillotines and started executing people when things were better than this in France. And he pointed out that, like, there's this sort of myth that exists that the entire French society rose up and started to guillotine the wealthy. And that's not what happened. He points out that, no, it was the middle class of France, when the lower classes started to rise up and protest, like we've seen throughout the United States, and they started bringing guillotines, the middle class did not protect the wealthy. And who is the middle class in France at that time, or in America this time? It's the police, right? It's the police forces. It's the people the administrators, the people who are responsible for maintaining the prestige and wealth of the upper classes. It's the managers. And in France, when the poor rose up, the management didn't join in. They just didn't do anything to prevent it. They just stepped aside and let the poor eat the rich. And I can say pretty cleanly that if the same thing were to happen here in Canada or in the United States, yep, I will happily allow that to occur. If Jeff Bezos got grabbed by a bunch of poor people and put in a guillotine and his head came off, I would be like, huh, okay. And I would move on with my life. Not a big loss, honestly. And that's more or less what I suspect will occur here in North America, is that the middle classes will eventually just allow the poor to do what they want to do. And if they attempt, and this is another part of it, right? If they attempt to stop the poor from doing what they want to do, they'll just be overwhelmed, right? And like, you begin to ask these police force, these policemen and all these managers, like, who are you working for? Like, you've never met these people, right? They don't show up at your place of work. They probably couldn't find your place of work on a map if they tried. They probably don't know anything about your business. They probably don't know who you are, right? They just pay a CEO class to take care of all this, right? Like, they don't actually do anything. They don't actually know anything, right? They just own it. They don't work there. And so if you have this, and there's this real, I've had this conversation with like people who are owners of their own business, right? And if you're an owner of your like own business, like if you own a shop, right? Like, none of this applies to you, obviously. You're like the lowest possible rung of the ownership scale. And if you're actually the owner who then also works at the business, right? You're actually a socialist. You're not a capitalist, right? If you own the business and you work at the business, you are a socialist, right? And it's only when you hire other people to do your work for you and you fuck off that you become a capitalist. It's only when you exploit the labor of others, right, that you're a capitalist. And like, if you were owning your own business and then you brought someone in and then you made them also a part owner, and you just kept doing that everybody who was part of the business was also part owner of that business, then you're a socialist. Because the workers own the means of production in your establishment. Capitalism is defined by the exploitation of the poor through slavery, either chattel slavery or wage slavery, right? And if you're being paid a wage, it's so that a capitalist can take the surplus value of your labor and put it in their own pockets and walk away, right? And the less work that they do, the happier they are. And if they can do no work, which is, definitely, like, if you're a billionaire, you're not working. What are you talking about? And these people, they're just worthless. They just siphon money away from, they siphon wealth and value and assets away from the society. And the Liberal Party allows them to do that, happily. And I just feel like that right now things are so tumultuous. There's so much turmoil in the world that what people are running on right now is exclusively fear. They're exclusively running on fear. There's no other attribute. They're not thinking about anything. They're just fearfully clutching onto their gains and praying that they will be able to keep those gains given the turmoil that we all find ourselves in. But if they were smart, like, if the conservatives had a brain in their heads, and it really tells you that they don't, right? Like, they don't actually have a brain in the whole bunch of them. They would be negotiating. They would be negotiating very hard right now, right? They would be making concessions. They would be saying to their workers, like, okay, like, we're going to offer a 4-day week. We're going to enact a basic income. We're going to We're going to ease things up. Like, if the Conservative Party literally came out and offered any one of these things, if they literally came out and offered any one of these things, they would win a landslide victory, because they have their base of support, which is essentially people who own stuff and want to continue owning stuff, and they don't care if poor people suffer. They're fine with cutting people's services if it means they get to keep the free land that their family was given when they moved here, right? They're fine with that. They're happy to go to church and pretend like they love Jesus, who tells them to give their money to the poor, and then vote for somebody who tells them to hoard as much wealth as possible, and in fact, massively cause harm to as many people as possible. They're happy to do that. So you have that group of people. And if you actually stood up as a conservative and said, we're going to pass a basic income, right? You would at the very least split the left, right? You would gain support from the left. And it would be enough to put you over the top, especially while the liberals stand around with a thumb up their butt offering absolutely nothing. And they always have offered absolutely nothing, right? And in the mix of all of this, the NDP is still as soft and as cowardly as it's ever been, right? Like, these guys should be pinning these capitalist losers to the wall, right? Like, people like Andrea Horwath, Jagmeet Singh should just be decimating these people, and because they're easy to decimate. They're losers, right? Guys like Doug Ford, guys like Jason Kenney, guys like Andrew Scheer, these guys are losers, right? They suck. They're idiots. They're illiterate. They don't know anything. They're stupid. And like, you want to take a look at an NDP leader who's actually doing what needs to be done in order to actually gain support? Look at Rachel Notley. Rachel Notley's not taking shit from this Jason Kenney fraud, right? She points out that he's a fraud, right? She's got no problem with that. Meanwhile, Andrea Horwath is like just the softest, like just like a roly-poly, like bag of flour, you know. She's not actually like putting up a fight. And the problem with the NDP is that they keep entering the conversation as if the people that they're talking to are these rational people who they can reason with, right? Everyone's terrified and angry, okay? Everyone's terrified and angry. And if you're not either attempting to scare them or galvanize their anger, then you're not engaging in proper politics, period. And yet the NDP keeps standing around being like, well, you know, if we take a look at the figures and we can see here that what the fuck are you doing? Like, Andrea Horwath shows up, she's got this whole thing where she shows up in a bus and she has like, look at the kids. They're all in these they're in a row and they're standing here, you know, we can't possibly social distance given these circumstances. And, like, no one gives a shit about that, Andrea. Like, I mean, maybe theoretically and hypothetically we do care, but it doesn't scare us. It's not galvanizing our anger, right? Like, I'm just so frustrated at Canadians about how tepid we are right now and how certain we are that our democratic system is going to work in our favor when it's so very clearly not, right? It's so very clearly not. And we keep throwing our support behind figures who are either actively lying to us and have shown to happily lie to us, or people who are actively attempting to destroy us. And so there just does come a point where I have to start asking, like, what's wrong with Canada? Like, what's wrong with Canadians? There's got to be something wrong with our brain that has let us just so gullibly fall in line with total nonsense. And it does seem that what's going on is that we're so terrified We're so terrified of this monolithic monster, which is the United States, that we're just happy that our society isn't crumbling. We're just happy that there aren't looters and rioters smashing in the streets. We're just so happy that everything seems relatively normal compared to the United States, that we're willing to ignore the fact that we live in this society that is collapsing collapsing under our feet, that we're like hysterically like all of the stuff that's happening in the States is going to happen in Canada, right? It's going to happen unless we actually stand up, say, no, we will stop voting for the people who continue to exacerbate the situation, who continue to increase income inequality, who refuse to actually fight for climate change issues, who refuse to actually help out younger people. Like, if I was under the age of 30, I'd be rioting. I don't understand it. I straight up just don't understand it at all. Like, I don't understand why a 25-year-old isn't getting their friends together and walking up and down the streets smashing things. Like, I don't understand it at all. Like, I feel like I'm lucky that I'm in this position where I got like a full-time job. I just snagged it. Right before all this crazy nonsense happened, I actually snagged a position, gave me a full-time job, right? And I'm just able to grind into that every single day. But goddamn, like, because the reality is, if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be living in the city anymore, right? There are no support systems, right? Like, if you don't have like family that you can live with, if you don't have, if you're not in a position where you can actually be supported by the people around you, like if you're a guy like me, yeah, I wouldn't be in the city anymore, right? I would have been thrown out of the city. Straight up. I wouldn't be able to afford anything. I wouldn't be able to afford what I've got on like a part-time job, or like cobbling together two jobs. It's not real, right? And I think that that's happening at a pretty accelerated rate. I think more and more people are just getting thrown out of this city. And the liberals are just going to stand by and let that happen, right? And then April's going to roll around, tax season's going to roll around, we're all going to get taxed for the support that we were given while the capitalist class just walks away. As they always do. As they always do, right? They're going to get bailed out, as they always do. We're going to pay for that bailout, and then we're going to pay for our own bailout. And then the capitalists are just going to jam all the money into offshore accounts, the way they always have and the way they always do. And we're just going to take it. We're going to accept it because we're gullible, we're scared, and we're stupid. And as long as we remain in this gullible, stupid, scared sort of space, it doesn't really matter what we do, right? It's not going to be until we actually have some courage, put on our big boy pants, put on our big girl titties, and actually take to the streets and show up at these people's houses, that anything meaningful is going to happen. Until then, like, they'll happily destroy our civil society, as they've been actively doing. They'll happily pretend like they want to help us while they stab us in the back, right? That's the liberal way. That's the conservative way, right? That's who they are. It's built into the core of their being. They're capitalists, right? If they're talking, they're lying. And we just buy it because we're stupid. Anyway, that's the end of this conversation, guys. I hope you're having a good day. I hope things are going well for you. Get laid, have a drink, smoke a bong, do what you need to do to get through. I hope that we can legislatively and politically figure out how to turn the sand under our feet into stone. I don't see it. I see a lot of derpy idiots pretending like they care. And we just seem to gullibly believe them. All right.